The question in my mind is, how do you create or relaunch a highly profitable and successful 6 to 7 figure business? With so much conflicting advice about the best ways to start and grow your business, how do you get it right the first time? I want to help entrepreneurs make a real difference and navigate the messy world of startup or relaunch. My name is John North, and this is the Startup Secrets for Entrepreneur Show. Join me today when we dig deep with our guests and get you the best blueprint so you can fast track your own business. This episode is sponsored by Evolvepreneur.app, your all-in-one online business system. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at startupsecrets.show right now. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Startup Secrets Show. I'm your host, John North, and my very special guest today is Michael Lapps from Yogurt Digital. So welcome, Michael, to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be here.
Cool. And so we had a bit of a chat about what we're going to have a chat today about. And basically, my understanding is you run a digital agency. You've got a lot of fairly high, sort of well-known clients, like ANZ, P&O Cruises, those type of people, plus also a breadth of other sorts of clients, obviously, up-and-coming clients and stuff like that. So how did you get into the digital marketing gig? Most people, including me, got in it by mistake. Like it's almost like you got forced into it somehow along the way.
That is actually 100% what happened. It was not deliberate. It was accidental, and I was forced into it. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a creative. So I actually wanted to work as like a creative director at an advertising agency, which is, a far cry from the data-driven approach of digital marketing. And, I always wanted to be the person creating the ads that you see on TV today. But that was around the time of the 2008 global financial crisis. And at that time, I was interning at an agency called James Walter Thompson, JWT. They were not taking other people on at that time. It was a very difficult time in the advertising sector.
Everybody everybody in sort of things like that, they always cut their money, like they weren't spending money on advertising.
Yeah, 100%. Marketing is usually the first thing to be cut when things get hard, which is, I get that. Everyone's got to cut from somewhere. But there was a guy who worked there called Daniel King, and he kind of took me. He worked in their 1 or 2 man digital team because digital wasn't as big a thing back then. And he was my first exposure to digital marketing, and I found it really interesting. And then after that, I was kind of looking for different work, and advertising industry was hard. And so I landed a job at a below the line agency, which I didn't enjoy that type of marketing. And that actually then forced me into digital eventually. I kind of looked at it and went, well, I can't do advertising. I don't want to do below the line. I found digital interesting enough to kind of say, you know what, I think that's where the whole industry is going. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to roll with the punches. And that's how I ended up in digital. I applied for a role up here in Sydney. I'm originally from Melbourne, and moved up 2 months later, landed the job, and have been in Sydney for the last decade.
And it's almost like it's been a whirlwind ever since. Like it's almost with digital marketing, there's never something else coming around that's suddenly changing the market, and it's such an evolving kind of beast that's very hard to master and think you've got it figured out sometimes. I reckon
there's no such thing. I know that some people want to call themselves masters or any gurus or anything like that, but I think that the hardest thing about digital marketing is that every single day is different, but it's also the most exciting thing because you've got new technologies, you've got new opportunities for development, new services, new strategies, new tactics, like all that type of stuff. I think it's impossible to be an expert is probably you can know a lot of things, but to get to that level of knowledge is almost impossible because it's constantly shifting and changing. We like to think that we're a pretty smart bunch, but we pride ourselves on the fact that we're comfortable with the fact that we don't know everything, and that keeps us really hungry.
I think so.
So yeah, it's
I think it's important to to think that you're still, you still got to learn stuff, because I think as soon as you start believing your own BS, I think that's when you get in trouble. I remember when I was in a former life, I was running an accounting software company, and my MIB started up, and they were spending all this money on marketing, and then the
yeah,
GST changed, and they had this huge upswell of customers. And they started to believe their own BS, because they thought they were going to get that many customers again for some reason. It's almost they got some uni students in to do some estimates or something, and then they basically they said, "Oh, we're going to spend on another couple 100,000 users," and they never did, because they sucked everything out of the market. So they started to believe that that their business wouldn't stop, when they didn't realise actually there's lack of customers. You get to a point where in a small country you've only got so many customers, and I think people forget that in marketing. They kind of think, "Oh, this is the big world, 7 billion people." But the reality is, if you don't niche down on the right sort of customer, then there's not as many of them as you think there are.
yeah.
Unless you've got a big brand like Uber or something like that, where you basically everybody's your customer. Most people don't have that ability.
Yeah, 100%. And we're certainly not a churn and burn agency, so we know the types of clients that we like to work with, and so we're not willing to just work with absolutely everyone. That's important. You're right, that kind of limits your overall customer base. But even beyond that, just understanding that it's an ever evolving space just really keeps us on our toes in general, which we absolutely love.
I think it's a good idea. So let's talk a little bit about change, essentially, because one of the things that has happened, and like you've got Apple suddenly deciding to sort of cut Facebook off in terms of marketing, and I've had discussion with Facebook managers and stuff, and they've sort of from Facebook, and they've basically said to me, "Look, I think you just go back to broad targeting, you'll be cool, right?" Because they really have kind of like completely knocked them around. And that's a big shift, really, when you think about it, because before you could target people and almost track what's going on. Now you got, even my TV app now comes up and says allowed to track or not.
That's right.
So people start getting more aware of privacy and more aware of what's being tracked. And I mean, my sister said to me the other day, "Oh, I was talking on the phone. I was talking to someone with the phone beside me, and then suddenly I got an ad about what I was talking about." And I said, "And no one will tell me that it's true that they run out." I said, "Yeah, they're listening to you for sure." And so I think the biggest problem is now people start getting paranoid about what's going on, starting to turn off their targeting, which in some respects is a bad idea, because then you're just going to get targeted for pregnant women if you're a man, like the stuff that's going to happen that, so I think there's a two-way street. But what's the last couple of big things, changes you see on the horizon for marketers, outside the fact that I think they're going to have to get better at marketing, because they're going to get less targeted audiences and less trusting audiences, I think, as well?
There's a few things that could happen. What actually will happen is, I guess, a different conversation. First of all, I think the change to Apple changing its situation with Facebook is certainly one big change. But then another one is Google announcing that they're getting rid of third-party cookies kind of in the next year or two is another massive change, because, as you pointed out, it just gives you far less targeting capabilities, and they're going to push you into other ways of tracking and targeting. I don't think that tracking and targeting will disappear entirely, but it
so just before that, tell us what a third-party cookie is for the people who aren't.
Oh, right. So a third-party cookie...
It's a tricky subject, when you actually look at it. It's
yes.
There's no second-party cookies that I'm aware of necessarily.
Yeah. So a third-party cookie would be, I'm a huge football fan. I follow the Premier League in the UK. There's a couple websites that I visit fairly regularly to get news and updates. And it always pops up saying, "Do you want to accept cookies from here?" And what that basically means is it allows them to put a cookie on your computer that allows them to track you and then re-advertise to you.
So wherever you go, right? So you go off their site, go somewhere else, and they're on a third-party site, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So they can basically take that data and they can use it however they want in order to advertise and sell to you in the future.
Kind of rude when you ask something about it, isn't it? It's like, can I just track your life from now on? Is that okay?
Yeah, correct.
Can I be your stalker?
I don't know if you've seen the new Apple ads. They're very clever around people, the people following them everywhere they go. They're brilliant, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, Google saying that they're removing that is massive, but it's a really nice reminder to everyone that the best data is first party data. That means that the customer is actually just giving you that data directly. and for you to own that data, not through third-party websites like
100%.
Google.
Yeah, 100%.
Because then you're reliant on someone else for all of your ongoing marketing initiatives. So a lot of companies, and especially a lot of the clients that we're working with, we have been pushing them to build up their own databases again.
Yep.
And a lot of companies have their own email marketing databases. They've got CRMs, but they might not be as active on them. They might not have strategies about growing their databases. They're happy to just kind of plot along as is. So that's been a huge focus area for us, because once someone is in your database, you have their information, and then you're legally allowed to use that however you want.
Exactly.
So if you want to use that through, building an audience within Google Ads or something like that, you can do that. You just won't be able to do that from within the Google platform and have Google build those audiences for you. So that's going to be a really big shift. To your point around what do I think will change in terms of from a marketing lens, I think it could push marketers to be, it will open up the door for creativity again in terms of attracting people in.
And you won't be limited by the ads that Facebook wants you to do, right? They say, oh, we don't like this ad, or we don't like this and that. Sometimes you get to a point where you think, well, just because you don't like it doesn't mean I can't run the thing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But I think it just really opens the door for people to get much more creative with their marketing strategies to try and get people into their database, to build greater brand awareness, to attract more customers at the top of the marketing funnel, because they're not going to just be able to rely on audiences. They're actually going to have to start building their own within their own databases, which means you're going to have to get people into the fold. You're not going to be able to do that using the same kind of one-trick pony that you may have been using previously. So I think it reopens the door for creativity in the marketing space, which I'm personally really excited about. But I think beyond that, marketers are going to have to spend a lot more time understanding who their customer is, because they're going to have, at least initially, perhaps less targeting capability, but over time, cookies are just going to be replaced by something else. There's no way that these companies who are publicly listed, like Facebook and Google and Apple and all the rest of it, they make money off this stuff.
Absolutely.
They're publicly traded companies. They owe the shareholders much more than they owe their end consumers. And so they're not going to just shoot themselves.
I always say to people, follow the money. Figure out where the money is, and then you'll know what's going on.
That's 100% correct. So they're always they're never gonna shoot themselves in the foot entirely when it comes to revenue.
And I think the thing too is you've got a situation where it's almost like they're pulling the ladder up behind them, because what's happening is they're siloing their data. So it's almost like Facebook's now saying, well, we can't, Apple's saying we're going to silo our data, and they're going to start creating their own independent data, not sharing with anybody else. So it's almost like they've gone from sharing to like being all separated. And I think that's going to probably start a bit of a war, I imagine, because even, Apple's starting advertising. I've noticed some advertising stuff now for Apple. So I think they all want to be each other. So they're all just trying to play the game of, let's see if I can get the biggest database and then leverage that. And so I think it's going to be like a next war level. Like I think you've got the social media wars. I think now you've got the data wars coming up.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see that these companies, they're moving into other areas. Like Apple is now moving into payments, right? So they're doing their own buy now, pay later product. They're going to move into their own credit card products. They're basically moving into the financial space on top of developing products.
I don't think I want to be a bank anymore, to be honest. I think the banks would got to be worried. Everybody's chasing after them now, right? Everybody wants
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Afterpay's, trying to be a bank. And so you've got Apple kind of moving into payments. You've got Facebook moving into kind of the search engine marketplace space as well, competing with like the eBays of the world and the Googles of the world. They're all running their own advertising. They're all collecting their own data and how they want to use it. They're all kind of building, as you correctly pointed out, kind of those like closed loop ecosystems where you can't really get out of it. And so they're all going to be developing. So yeah, I think that we're seeing a very interesting race of titans who are all trying to diversify, but not into the same areas. Although Facebook is definitely going into payments as well, especially through crypto. So the diversification is going to be massive, and where these companies started is not where they're going to finish.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing about it is that what I've noticed is when these companies first get into these gigs, they get very friendly and very easy to get on with. And then as time goes on, they get harder and harder. And so I think that's what's going to happen. Like suddenly they're all, all roses and, like want to go on a date, and then suddenly next time they don't want to see you ever again. It's almost like, and I was like, so take advantage of, I reckon, if they're friendly, but expected they're not going to necessarily be friendly forever, I think.
Totally. If you remember, do you remember Google's tagline when they first started the company? Their motto was, yeah, don't be evil.
Yeah.
That was it. I haven't heard them say that.
They took it away. They actually
they very quietly pushed that off to the side and never spoke of it ever again. But for us, I wouldn't say that I was an early stage digital marketer, but I've been around in the industry for long enough to know that that's where it all started. And for that to not really be a public thing anymore is, I think that it's very telling.
The other thing I find interesting with Google, and I think they're probably the most failed company in the world, I reckon, outside Amazon possibly, because when you go to Google's projects they've actually sunsetted, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And so my son looked up this thing the other day, and there's a list of all the projects that Google ever sunsetted, and there's just so many of them. And you think to yourself, these guys are experimenting, they're not failing. And this is the thing that I think with a lot of entrepreneurs, and they talk about failure, I tried this and it failed. But it's all about what you learn about it. So it's almost like Google has this attitude that they don't care if they fail. They want to try something. If they crack something, they're playing the numbers game. They're cracking something. They think, if we crack this. And I mean, what do they say? Like Google Plus was an absolute failure with 600 million users. Like what small business operator wouldn't want 600 million users? That's an failure. Let's kick that to the curb. Like we're not going to do that anymore. It's like, what?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The whole Silicon Valley motto is, move fast and break things, right? That's been their motto for years. That's been their approach. And you're right. The thing is that when Google strikes gold on something, it's like you're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
Yeah.
The second that they strike gold on something. Yeah. So, for them to sunset 300 projects and then land 10 really big ones, they're fine. Those other projects were well and truly worth the failure and the investment in order to learn the lessons to make it to the big time. Even if you look at Google systems, right? They've got Google Analytics.
Yeah.
Google Analytics, for anyone that's ever logged into it, is quite a good looking, pretty functional system. But Google didn't build it. They bought it and then they rebranded it. And so that's why it works so well. But if you look at the Google Ads platform, it is a dog's breakfast. It is so poor in there. It has really great functionality, but the UX and UI is horrific. But they built it in-house, right?
Yeah. So they got no idea about user interface.
No. There was actually a really famous article a while ago from one of the engineers at Google. I think it actually might have been a designer. I can't remember now. This was a long time ago. I'm talking about probably 7-8 years. And this designer wrote an article saying, I'm quitting Google because I'm spending more time arguing over 1 or 2 pixels, right? And we're sitting in these rooms arguing over these 1 or 2 pixels. And I actually just can't do it. This is not why I got into design. I got into design for the bigger picture thinking, and we're having arguments over these tiny things. And then Google responded with also a publicly written letter saying, here's why we do this. And they spoke about in the ads section, again, old times where the ads were more prominent. They were trying to select which blue they wanted to use. And so they were arguing over which color blue. And so they A/B tested it. And the one that they landed on when they A/B tested it, the amount of money that they made from that one test, the uplift in click-through was so phenomenal that they basically turned around and said, this is why we test. This is why we debate these things, because the money that's on the line is billions.
Money's in the colours, yeah. And I mean, Facebook, I think my understanding is because Zuckerberg's colourblind, that's why it's blue.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah. So
I did not know that.
So apparently he's colourblind. I don't know how severely colourblind, but apparently one of the blues is the colour he can see. So he basically made it blue. He probably doesn't even know what colour it is. He probably thinks it's green. I don't know. It's quite funny when you talk about colourblind people, because I've had emails with a client who's colourblind. He's a cardiologist, and I send these emails and I go, "What colour should I put this in?" I wonder if you could actually even tell if I've changed the colour or not. So it's quite funny. So I guess it's interesting when you talk about this whole. I think it's getting back to basics thing, because part of the thing is we've developed was an Evolvepreneur.app platform designed around this concept of owning your own stuff, owning your own piece of real estate. And owning your customer base. And I think that the challenge is rent versus buy or own. And I think that's the problem in the marketplace. They were renting all this space, and then suddenly they realised that you can be taken away from you anytime you like. And I think owning your own stuff, owning your own space, I learned that in a very important lesson way back, probably about 10 years ago, when it cost me $1 million to find out that if you don't own your own stuff, then anybody can just come take it. And they decided to come take it. And it's actually my startup story, but basically, like 7-year war trying to keep something I didn't even own, which when you think about it, when you look back on it, you think, what a crazy thing were you doing there? What were you trying to do? How do you even going to win, trying to win something you didn't even own?
Yeah. It's interesting, the owned versus earned space on Google, right? Ads versus organic. And I actually, for every year that I've been in digital marketing, I've read an article saying that SEO is dead.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's still very.
Well, email's dead too. Did you know that? That email's dead.
Yeah, correct. I wish email was dead. I wish I didn't have to open my inbox anymore. I think the interesting thing about like the SEO space, owned versus earned, and really wanting to rank well organically, is that SEO is not dead, but I would say that it's weakened. Because again, talking about Google as a publicly listed company, they make 95% plus of their revenue from Google ads. So they are never going to equally weight their organic listings there when they don't make any money from them.
You're back to following them.
And exactly. And so Bing is just so far behind that it's going to be hard to take Google down. They're probably going to have to implode to some degree. But Google Ads is just taking up more and more and more real estate. First it was like all at the top and down the side. Then they moved it all to the left and pushed it down. Then they make the ads bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they blend them in so you can't differentiate them from organic listings. Yeah. Then they add in maps underneath that. And all of a sudden, where you used to rank first organically, you're now at the very bottom of the first page after a couple of scrolls.
Yeah.
And ads make up the primary listings. And so, I think that, more and more companies are going to have to invest in the earned, owned, earned or paid, right? They're going to have to pay for it. They're going to have to pay for traffic. They're not going to ever be able to fully own kind of the customer in that regard, because more brands are being pushed into Google ads because they cannot compete on SEO.
Yeah.
The bigger companies are spending more on it just for those kind of the 3 spots that are actually organic on the first page. And everyone else is bidding.
And I think that the challenge there is that, you've got a situation where probably in only recent times, the big companies have even figured out social media, or even figured out AdWords as such. Like, they've been able to sort of go through the digital marketing of running the traditional print ads, and now they've kind of cottoned onto the idea. And I think I read somewhere where Zuckerberg said that his whole game plan was to attract the big guys by attracting the little guys, because eventually the wealth of the little guys would actually draw attention to the big guys. They need to pay attention to this, and then these big marketing campaigns come in and they start spending big dollars with them, and slowly but surely they're less being nice to little guys, which I've noticed in the last couple of years as they get nastier and nastier with the little guys because I have to deal with them. And so I think that's what's happening. And so they're trying to attract these big marketers because they spend a lot of money and they actually don't care necessarily whether they get a result. Whereas the little guys are saying, I have to get an earnings on revenue, I have to do this and that. Those big guys say, so we're going to spend you've got this $100 million to spend on marketing, we'll just spend it. And there's no one sitting there going, oh, hang on a minute, we have to get a result here. No one's really focused on that. They're focused on their brand, and they're thinking at a different level. And I think that's going to be interesting when the little guy gets to the point where they can't afford the advertising. They're going to have to have had something in the backstop, otherwise they're doomed, because they're not going to be able to just buy their way in without a lot of money. Control your destiny and create a complete business system for your online business. Evolvepreneur.app. offers an easy and cost-effective way to build your online business by helping you avoid the pain and stress of implementing multiple systems, giving you the freedom to automate and scale. Support our sponsor by grabbing a free copy of Startup Secrets for Entrepreneurs at evolvepreneur.app.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I spoke to a friend of mine who lives in the US and runs a startup. And I won't name names, don't want to give away trade secrets, but he said something really interesting. He's in a very competitive space, and he was trying to attract customers through Google Ads and Facebook ads, and it was like quite targeted as they moved into different cities. And what he found is the most effective way to get a customer was through a letterbox drop. And so
because nobody gets any mail anymore, really. Like, they don't get a lot of mail that's actually real.
That's exactly what he was saying. They go into a small town and they basically go, all right, cool, we're going to spend $20,000, $30,000 on a letterbox drop. We're going to go into like the suburbs that we really want to take over, and we're just going to put it into their mail because they're getting so much less mail these days that we're actually getting more cut through, and our cost per letter is so low to get in front of someone new that we're attracting significantly more customers at way less cost than using digital methods. And I was like, sorry, I just want to confirm this. When you go out for investment, you're going to tell them that your strategy is letterbox drops? And he goes, not only am I going to tell them that that is our strategy, but they're going to love it because they're going to look at the cost of acquisition and it's going to blow their minds. They're going to tell all of their other investments to go and start doing letterbox drops.
He should shut up, actually, because what's going to happen is everybody's going to do it and stuff him up in the end.
But I thought it was brilliant. And it comes back to, people went, all right, well, things are getting more expensive. I'm going to have less tracking and, it's going to be harder to build audiences and get really targeted. So I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to do something really creative and I'm going to get direct to the customer that I want. And I'm just going to do it this way because it's cheaper, and why not do that?
And it's targeted when you think about it, right? Because there's no wastage, right? The mail will go where it's supposed to go, ultimately, unless they drop it in the bin on the way past. But the thing is that the mail will go in the right place. So it's almost like a much more targeted, assured that you're going to land somewhere, as opposed to an ad that you don't really know where it's going to go. Yeah. And I think the thing about it is, too, you're ultimately going to have this kind of tactile feel. Because I watched a futurist speak a few years ago, and he said something very interesting. He said, if you're a high-touch business, you need to also go low-touch. If you're a low-touch business, you need to go high-touch. And so when I look at it, it's almost like if you're a technical sort of social media business where you don't have any touch at all because there's nothing they can see or touch, sending a mail drop is suddenly now you become tactile. And I think that's the secret, is that if you're doing one way, don't go completely one way. Have a backstop in terms of, can you send them something in the mail? Can you somehow touch them and, not inappropriately? But, like in that situation, right? And I think that's the interesting mix that people kind of forget. They must grab on something and then go, that's completely the direction, and don't
make it real.
Else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that there's lots of companies that are out there that are going to start doing like some really interesting things as they realize that with more and more people bidding on Google ads, the cost per click is going to continue to skyrocket. And, year on year, we're seeing 10 to 15% increases in cost per click, which means every single year you have to up your budget by 10 to 15% just to get the same result that you did last year.
Yeah, it's like a gambling game, isn't it?
100%. But what that actually fundamentally means is that for those that don't have deep pockets, for smaller businesses, particularly in Australia, who've been hit very hard during the pandemic, they don't have that kind of money to just be throwing around. So it's going to create more and more of a gap between the companies that can afford and the companies that cannot. And the companies that cannot are going to have to find other channels because as Google becomes more and more prominent and as ads take up more of the real estate, that cost per click is only going to go up and get more competitive. And I think that could be Google's fatal flaw in the end. Is that because it's a competition-based market, they're going to start pricing people out, and they're going to have to find other ways of doing that. And that might be Bing, or it might be other traditional marketing methods, but it's not sustainable forever.
No,
although I'm sure that people at Google are working on that.
Yeah, well, they just build Google cars or something in the meantime. So I think they've got so many pies. I think probably got moved on from that anyway. So let's touch on a little bit about automation, because it's quite interesting. It's kind of made its discovery, and it's so obvious. And the guy tells you when it's obvious, but it's not obvious at the time when you're doing it. And that a lot of these people build websites, and the idea is to automate the sale and not have in. And I saw something like a Facebook group I was looking the other day and asking for business problems, and somebody says, "Oh, automate sales more so I can get more customers or whatever. Like get more customers." And what we realized was that when we're selling this membership product, what we actually did to actually start selling it was the human interaction of that. So we'd say automate the front end, and as soon as it became a prospect, someone real actually spoke to them, and that's by email, whatever. And we found our actual conversion rates went up again now, because suddenly they're not being automated into a sale, and most people are wise enough to know that they're being automated. And it started working because we were actually having that interaction backwards and forwards and actually handling the proper sales process you do when someone wants to buy something, right? Going through that phase of that process. It's almost like people have forgotten about that. And it's like, oh, we'll just, send a targeted ad, get their email address, and then they'll buy off the screen. Yeah, that'll be it. We don't have to do anything else. And people don't necessarily buy that way anyway, but that's what, volume will help you. But
yeah, I think automation has a place. I think it also depends on the company and what you're doing. Service-based businesses versus, for example, e-commerce businesses. If you're an e-commerce business, you absolutely want as much automation as possible because you are working on a volume game. And if someone wants to buy a white dress or a blue t-shirt, you can't speak to every single customer individually, right? Especially if they're coming to your website, they're usually prepared to buy online.
You go broke fast.
And that's why
you go broke fast with stuff.
and that's why there's so many pure play e-commerce businesses that no longer have a bricks and mortar or a retail presence because they understand that that's actually no longer a requirement and it's an overhead that they don't need. And then there's other businesses like the Kathmandus of the world where you do exactly what you said. You need the tactile experience because people are buying stuff for adventure. So they
I can't believe people pay that amount of money for that stuff, even though shops even exist. It still blows the mind, I've got to tell you.
They are doing a bang up job, I can tell you. I own some shares in Kathmandu, and that was a good investment at the start of the pandemic. But the idea there is, understanding that even within the e-commerce space, sometimes you need bricks and mortar, sometimes you don't, and there's only so much you can automate. I agree with you in principle that if you're a service-based business, having the human touch is still really valuable. Because personally, I want to buy from people.
Yep.
And where possible, speaking to someone who really could really get me across the line.
Yeah.
And there's a benefit to that. But then there's other things like I don't want to wait 45 minutes on the phone to speak to the insurance company. I just want to do it all online.
It is bizarre when you find that some of these companies will, like GoDaddy's a great example, right? It frustrates the hell out of me because GoDaddy, you cannot actually email them for support. You got to call them. That's it now. You can't actually get any contact outside calling them. And,
You're right.
And when I Google it, that people complain about being on hold for 2 hours. And it's like, what are you trying to do? Most of these things you solve, it's like you just don't want to handle support tickets. You want someone to talk rubbish on the phone for half an hour trying to explain their problem to someone.
Yeah.
To me, it's beggars belief that an IT company would force everybody to call them, but they probably know that no one will, right? And so it's almost like, and to me, it's like it's a bad idea. And then I actually tried to transfer them away from the other day and found out that they actually generate incorrect codes, so that you have to call them to get the right codes. So it's almost like you're trying to do the wrong thing by automating something, and then you're trying to go high touch for stuff that's not relevant to what you need the customer wants. He doesn't want to be calling you for a simple little thing. He just wants someone to fix it.
Yeah, and I mean, businesses have to find ways of building efficiencies, but they have to build efficiencies in the right areas. And I think that's where a lot of companies go wrong, is they start focusing on, why don't we automate the part of the process that is actually most important to converting the customer? And traditionally that has been done manually, and that's worked very well. Instead of saying, well, what about all these smaller processes that happen exactly like what you said on the front end that we actually don't need to do? We don't have to take the customer through this, and it'll save us possibly hundreds of hours a month.
Yep.
See, I look at that and go, we can be doing better. And so we work with some of our clients on that kind of automation and go, this part, don't do this anymore. Let's find a system or a tool that will do that for you. But this part, keep that, because what your customers are telling us is that this is really valuable to them, and it's why they want to engage with you. It's your selling point.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that understanding that whole customer journey. I think that's something we spoke to clients about is like you need to make sure that you think about that customer journey from where they start, where they finish, and where they go to make sure you don't have any gaps in it. And going to a website with absolutely zero support, that you're trying to sell something, to me is crazy talk because you've got to provide some mechanism to talk to people. Unless you're Facebook and get away with it, or Microsoft, because that's like those guys, you're very hard to get hold of anyone. You're paying, right? And they managed to do it, but very few companies, I think, can be in that position. They can turn around and say, look, I can't afford not to talk to my customer and not put a mechanism in place to somehow service that customer, whether it be automated or not. But I think it's just, but you see it so much, I don't know whether you do, but I see a lot of websites where you go to, there's absolutely no way to contact them.
Yeah,
Except some form.
and it's
nobody ever tests their form on their contact button, by the way. Like, it's like the first thing in the world that annoys the hell out of me is they go to a page, you have a contact us button, and you clear out that form, and no one ever answers you.
Yeah, and it's such like that's like 101 stuff.
Yeah.
But I usually find that like the bigger the company, the more that stuff is broken. I don't know about you, but it's like,
I was talking to Eway the other day. I filled a form out 3 weeks ago. I still haven't been contacted. And it's like because their support system's broken. So what's happening is I can't go into the support page for some reason. I can't log a support ticket because I'm a customer. And the only way I do is I trumble through the emails and I find sold support email I can send it to. But the reality is their support system's broken and their form's obviously broken. So the lights are on but no one's home. Well, how much money are you losing when you're not testing that? It's almost like that's another thing I think people don't do. Is you should test that stuff every so often. Like you shouldn't just assume it works.
Just make sure that it's all working the way it should be, 100%. Absolutely, yeah. I think automation is a wonderful thing. I wrote an article on Umbrella not that long ago talking about what automation and artificial intelligence is going to mean for us in the future as a working force, and that there's a lot of risks there, and an enormous amount of benefits, and it just depends where you sit in the food chain, and it depends what industry you're in, because I think it's going to create an enormous amount of unemployment. And it's going to make businesses richer and more profitable than they've ever been. Yeah. And so,
scary times for the unskilled or, the unskilled people who haven't really reskilled, they're going to be in big trouble.
But even for some skilled workers, there'll be a lot of people that get put out of jobs. You and I were discussing even before the show, what does it actually mean for the marketing community? If so much is being automated, how is that going to work? Google, more and more of the products that they're releasing are automated. They release smart shopping, for example. It's a fully automated system, but it's all in a black box, which means you don't get to see what's actually happening there. You can't really optimize it. It's not hands-on. You kind of set it up and it runs. So if Google's going to, and I'm just using them as an example, but that could go with any of the kind of the big tech companies. If more and more of that stuff gets automated, where do the marketers come in? Right? Because we're going to be doing less of the implementation work. So the answer there is that, marketers should really, if they want to upskill and cross-skill, it should be into strategy, understanding more of the services, how it works, which channels they should be using and when. That type of thing is going to be really important, more so than knowing how to, day-to-day run and optimize a search ads campaign, which right now is valuable, but in 5 years might not be. It might be completely obsolete. And we don't know what Google's kind of cooking up, but that's where it's all headed for them, because it's what it's going to allow them to make maximum amounts of cash.
As well as the fact that you won't have to worry about an actual interface you can use. So, I read this book that said that essentially within the future, everybody will probably have to reskill every 10 years at least, and reskill from a major thing going from, say, a lawnmower repairman to a drone engineer. So it's almost like there's going to be a certain segment of the population who will never be able to reskill because they just don't have the background or the ability to understand, say digital. So they're an analog age and they've never really done digital. They're going to struggle to understand that, and they're also going to need years of training to get there. Who's going to pay for that? And so it's going to be an interesting time if you think you're skilled in one area and then tomorrow your job's not obsolete. If Uber decides that they're going to have automated cars and you're going to have an Uber driver, suddenly the entire industry of taxi drivers is gone. How many of those taxi drivers have other skills that they can actually get another job in? So it's like it's going to change things dramatically.
Yep, and that's also where ageism comes in. because a lot of companies are going to say, well, you're probably not the right fit to be reskilling or anything else. And they're going to look at someone's age and be like, nope, too hard basket. We're just going to like bring in young people who we can train from scratch, who are going to demand less salary to begin with as well than, someone who's kind of more advanced in their career. And so that's going to create an issue as well, for sure, that I can already see happening. So yeah, I think that there's going to be a very difficult transition period over probably the next 5 or 10 years, which, I hope doesn't happen, but also I'm like a optimistic realist is probably the way I describe myself.
There's opportunities in all this. Like, I think the thing is, if you see what's coming, it's easier to think, okay, I won't go and learn this new skill I was thinking about learning because it's probably going to be useless in 5 years' time or even less. And being aware of what's going on as opposed to being caught by accident, caught out by it and saying, well, I didn't see that coming. And the biggest problem is we've got so much information in the world now that no one seems to read it or read the wrong stuff.
Or you just read the stuff that Facebook and Google keep putting to you because the algorithms say that it's something you're interested in, and then you kind of live in your own little bubble.
It's more of the same. Give me more chips.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming along. It's we've had to run over a little bit of time, but as I said, sometimes we get carried away. So I think it was a great conversation. So it's certainly worth digging into. So if someone wants to talk to you about marketing, and so who's your best customer, and how should they get in contact with you? And we'll put the links up as well on the post.
So as an agency, we kind of specialize in 3 core areas. We've got SEO and content. We've got paid media, which pretty much like paid social, Google ads, Bing ads. So anything that follows like a pay-per-click model, like paid ads. And then third, we have a UX and conversion optimization team, which basically designs, builds, and optimizes websites to maximize revenue and inquiries. And so we're kind of structured to work through the entire funnel. How do we attract more people, build your brand awareness? How do we get them interested in you? And then how do we get them to purchase? So in terms of the types of clients that we like to work with, generally speaking, our clients tend to work with us across multiples of those services. They like to work with us across digital strategy as a whole, rather than necessarily pigeonholing us into, can you just run my Facebook ads and nothing else? It's not that we can't do that. It's that as an agency where we specialize is in understanding your business, understanding your customer, and then building you a custom strategy for your business to execute on. And that usually involves multi-service, multi-channel. So that's probably an important aspect for us. And then we really like to work with clients that are, I think, very collaborative, are understanding, and who want a genuine long-term partnership. As I said, we're not a churn and burn agency. Clients tend to stay with us for years and years. And that means that people who are like very impatient and want everything done like within 24 hours and, will cut and change agencies every 2 and 3 months is not a great fit for us. No. We want people who are going to come to us and be like, I'm willing to commit 1, 2, 3+ years, and to really give this a red hot crack, and work towards, set targets, and, who want to invest in this partnership the same way that we do. And that's really important for us, is that kind of attitude.
A slow burn, basically, at the end of the day. Like, it's not instant. Well, overnight success isn't very easily overnight. So,
yeah, what's the famous saying? It took me 10 years to be an overnight success, right? Like, and it's not that we're not going to perform for 1, 2, or 3+ years. It's that nothing in digital happens overnight. Sometimes it does, and that's really lucky, and that's fantastic. But generally speaking, most of it is the iterative process of optimization and making things better and taking those lessons and reapplying them so that you can get that real J-curve growth. But, the J-curve starts flattened down and then it kind of accelerates from there. So, you have to be prepared, not necessarily for a drop, but you have to be prepared that, marketing is not like a 2-day game. It's you do
like it's not a strategy, right? I think it's like anything. Like, you have to earn it, you have to do the work. And I speak to a lot of clients, say, look, you're gonna have to do the work. There's no easy way. I think sometimes they think, I'll just put ads on up there and it'll work. But the reality is, you've got to learn your customer. You've got to get this right, and this takes time. Particularly when you come in, and most people, we realise, don't really know their customer well enough to be able to market to them in the first place. So,
or don't know them at all.
Yeah, or don't even know them at all. So, which is a thing that I was constantly asking myself all the time. What my customer look like? What do they do in the morning? What really do they like? And when you start asking sort of deep questions about your customer, it becomes a real deep hole of thought. And sometimes I think you get a bit carried away. But I think knowing your customer well and better is probably the best thing that can ever happen out of this process, I think. Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
So, what's the website that they can go to sort of engage with?
Yes.
As a matter of interest.
So you can head over to yogurtdigital.com.au. That's yogurt with an H for those of you that are in America. So YOGHURT digital.com.au. Gotcha. And you can read some of our case studies. You can take a look at our blog. You can read more about our services, and you can certainly inquire with us. And we'd absolutely love to have a chat with you.
Cool. I reckon I should check you out. So thanks so much for coming on, and maybe we'll talk again next time when the next big thing comes out.
Absolutely. Would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap on another awesome episode for the Startup Secret Show for entrepreneurs. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we'd be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at startupsecrets.show right now. Until next time, if you're an entrepreneur, make a start on your next great business idea today.